If this story touched your heart, we'd love to know. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below so we can see how far this story has reached. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because tomorrow we have another powerful story waiting for you. One that might just change the way you see the world. Don't miss it. Thank you for being part of this journey with us. He disguised himself as homeless. But what a 10-year-old said changed everything. Richard Hayes had everything a man could dream of: a billion-dollar business empire, a mansion overlooking the Pacific Ocean, and a lifestyle most people could only imagine. Yet, as he sat alone, in his spacious home office one quiet evening, none of it seemed to matter anymore. At 62 years old, Richard had just received the harshest news of his life. He had a rare, incurable heart condition. The doctor had explained it gently, but the message was clear. Even with aggressive treatment, he had only a few months left. And just like that, the walls of his luxurious life began to close in around him. Richard wasn't afraid of death. He was afraid of dying without meaning. Despite all the zeros in his bank account, he had no family, no children, no one to carry on his legacy. Years ago, he had been told he was infertile, sterile, as the doctors had put it, and he had accepted it as a cold fact of life. Relationships had come and gone, none of them lasting long enough to build a family. Now, with the end creeping closer by the day, he realized how empty his world truly was. For years, Richard had buried himself in numbers, stocks, and strategies, building companies and crushing competitors. But what had he really built? Who would remember him, and more importantly, who would care? The thought haunted him as he stared out the window at the crashing waves below his Malibu estate. The fortune he had worked so hard to build, over $200 million in assets, suddenly felt like a burden without a purpose. That night, something inside him shifted. If he couldn't extend his life, then perhaps he could give someone else a new one. Someone who wasn't driven by greed, who didn't see people through the lens of profit and loss. Someone with a good heart. But how would he find a person like that? Someone truly deserving, in a world that often judged worth by wealth. And then the idea came to him, wild and unfiltered. What if he disguised himself as a homeless man? What if he gave up his suits and luxury watches, swapped them for tattered clothes, and walked the streets as someone with nothing? Maybe, just maybe, in doing so, he could find someone who saw beyond appearances, someone who would show kindness to a stranger without knowing they were a billionaire. It was risky, foolish even, especially with his health in such a fragile state. But Richard didn't hesitate. This was his final mission: to find a worthy soul before time ran out. He gathered a few basic items, left a note with his attorney, and walked out of his mansion one last time, wearing old jeans, a faded hoodie, and a pair of worn-out sneakers. As he stepped into the night, blending into the shadows of the city, he whispered to himself, "Let the real journey begin." The first few days on the streets were brutal. Richard Hayes, once a billionaire with everything at his fingertips, now wandered the sidewalks of New York City, just another face among the forgotten. The cold bit through his thin hoodie, his legs ached from walking miles, and the stares, or worse, the way people refused to look at him at all, hit harder than he expected. He had traded luxury for invisibility, but he stayed the course. Somewhere out there was a person whose heart was worth more than any fortune, and Richard was determined to find them. On the sixth night, a storm rolled in. Rain poured down like punishment, soaking his clothes and turning every breath into fog. Richard took shelter under the awning of a closed diner near Central Park. He sat on the cold concrete, shivering, his hands trembling, not just from the temperature but from exhaustion. His heart pounded harder than usual, irregular, heavy. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Just hold on a little longer." That's when he heard it. Laughter. Not the good kind, the sharp, mocking kind that crawled under your skin. Group of teenagers, maybe 5 or 6 of them, emerged from the shadows. Hooded, loud, full of reckless energy. One of them pointed, "Yo, look at this guy. What's a zombie doing out here?" Before Richard could respond, they surrounded him. He tried to stay calm, tried to reason. I'm just trying to make it through the night like anyone else. But they didn't care. One of them shoved him hard, sending him crashing against the wall. Another kicked over the cup he had been using for spare change. Laughter rang out, cruel and sharp, echoing down the wet streets. Then came the punch, hard to the ribs, and Richard collapsed to the ground, gasping, rain mixing with blood. "Stop it! Leave him alone! That's my dad!" a young voice suddenly shouted from the darkness. The boys froze. A small figure, maybe 10 years old, came running into the scene. His eyes were blazing with courage, fists clenched. "Get away from him!" The gang hesitated, muttered a few curses, and retreated into the night. Richard lay stunned, staring up at the boy standing over him, breathing hard. Why did you call me that?" he asked, every word a struggle. The boy dropped to his knees beside him, rain falling on both their faces. "Because you are my dad. My name is Ethan. My mom told me everything. I've been looking for you." Richard blinked through the pain and confusion. I can't have kids," he whispered, memories of medical reports flashing through his mind. But Ethan simply held out his hand. "I don't care what anyone told you. You're my father, and I'm taking you home." And just like that, Richard's mission to find someone worth his legacy took an unimaginable turn, because maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as alone in the world as he thought. Richard could barely walk, but Ethan never let go of his hand. The boy guided him down the dimly lit sidewalks of Queens, through back streets and broken fences, until they reached a small, weathered house with peeling paint and a crooked mailbox. It was a far cry from the mansion Richard had left behind, but somehow it felt alive, safe. As they stepped inside, the warmth hit him first, not just from the heater humming in the corner, but from the smell of home-cooked food and the sound of dishes clinking in the kitchen. A woman's voice called out, "Ethan, you're soaked, honey. Where have you—" She stopped cold in the doorway, a dish towel still in her hands. Her eyes widened, mouth parting in disbelief as she took in the soaked, bruised man standing beside her son. She dropped the towel. "Richard!" Richard stared at her, heart hammering. "Amanda!" he croaked. It had been over a decade since they last saw each other. She looked older, sure, but still had those fierce eyes, that determined jawline. He never expected to see her again, not like this. "What happened to you? What are you wearing? Are you hurt?" she asked, rushing to his side, supporting him as his knees buckled. "I'm okay," Richard muttered. "But Ethan—" He said, "I'm his father." Amanda froze. Her eyes darted to her son, then back to Richard. "You are," she whispered. "So you're his dad?" "That's impossible," he said, shaking his head. "I'm sterile. I was tested more than once." Amanda sighed, sitting him down on the couch. "I know what the doctors told you, but I also know what I went through. I found out I was pregnant just after you left. I tried to find you, but you had moved, changed numbers, and I didn't have the means or the strength back then. I was alone." Richard sat in stunned silence, the weight of her words pressing down on him harder than the bruises on his ribs. "You raised him alone? All this time?" She nodded, her voice tight. "I did my best. But there's more." Richard's heart dropped. "More?" Amanda hesitated. Then she said the words that shattered everything he thought he knew. "Ethan has a twin sister." The room went silent. "She was born with him. I named her Emily. But I couldn't afford to raise 2 babies on my own. I was working too, jobs barely surviving. I made the hardest choice of my life. I put her up for adoption. A good family took her. I've followed her life from a distance, but I've never told Ethan. Until now." Richard stared at her, trying to process them. Flood of emotions. "A daughter," he whispered. "I have a daughter too." Amanda's voice cracked. "Yes. And now, Ethan is sick. They both are." Everything Richard thought he was searching for, someone to leave his legacy to, was no longer an abstract. Hope. It was real, living, breathing, and in danger. And for the first time in years, Richard Hayes felt something deeper than fear or regret. He felt purpose, and he knew the real fight was just beginning. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and worry. Richard sat at Ethan's bedside, watching the steady rise and fall of his son's chest. The monitors beeped in slow, steady rhythm, each one a cruel reminder that time was slipping away. Amanda stood near the window, arms crossed tightly, eyes red from crying. "Ethan has a rare genetic disorder," the doctor had said. "His only hope is a transplant, and he's not the only one." The second blow came moments later. Emily, your daughter, was admitted to a hospital in Los Angeles with the same condition. She's critical. She needs a transplant. 2. Richard had barely been able to stand when he heard it. 2 children, his children, both fighting for their lives. "How is this possible?" he asked, his voice trembling. The doctor sighed. "It's inherited. Both parents have to carry. The gene, we think you're a match, maybe the only one," Amanda gasped. "What about me?" "You're not compatible," the doctor said. "And Mr. Hayes, we need to be honest. Your heart condition makes donation extremely dangerous. You might not survive." Richard didn't hesitate. "Run the tests, I don't care what it costs." "Richard," Amanda pleaded, grabbing his arm. "Please think about this. You could die." He turned to her, eyes fierce. "And if I do nothing, we could lose them both. I won't live with that." Within hours, Richard was prepped for surgery. But there was one more hurdle. Emily. The hospital in LA confirmed she was too weak to be a donor and needed help fast. Richard made a decision no one expected. "I'm going to get her. You can't even walk across the room without nearly passing out." Amanda protested. "I'll find the strength," he said. "She can't make that trip alone." He arranged a private medical jet, a full care team, and despite every doctor's warning, boarded the plane himself. The flight was long. Over. 2,400 miles of anxiety and prayer. Richard sat beside Emily's stretcher, barely able to keep his own head up. But when he looked at her, pale, fragile, tubes everywhere, he found the will to keep going. Halfway through the flight, turbulence shook the plane. The pilot's voice cracked over the speaker. "We're losing pressure. Preparing for emergency landing." "No," Richard whispered, clutching Emily's hand. "Not now. Not when we're this close." They made an emergency stop in Denver, waited hours for a safe window to fly again. By the time they reached New York, Richard could barely breathe. But he didn't stop. Both children were rushed into the operating room. Richard signed the final consent forms with trembling hands. "You understand this could kill you?" the surgeon asked. "I understand," Richard said, "but if it saves them, it's worth it." As he lay on the table, surrounded by cold, metal and bright lights, he whispered his final thought before the anesthesia took hold. "Tell my kids I'd do it all again." And then, silence. The surgery lasted for hours, a marathon of precision, pressure, and prayers. In one operating room, Ethan and Emily fought for their young lives, their fragile bodies accepting the transplants that could give them a second chance. In another, Richard Hayes, their father, lay motionless, his body pushed to the edge of survival. He had given everything, literally, for the children he had only just met. For a terrifying moment, Richard's heart stopped. "We're losing him," a nurse shouted. The room exploded into motion. Chest compressions, adrenaline, defibrillator pads. The lead surgeon barked orders, sweat beading on his forehead. "Come on, Richard, you came this far. Don't quit now." Minutes passed like hours. Then, a single beep, another. The heart monitor came back to life. Faint, but steady. "He's back," the nurse whispered, tears in her eyes. "He's fighting." Hours later, Richard opened his eyes. The white lights of the ICU blurred into focus. Amanda was at his bedside, her hand in his, her face lit up with joy and exhaustion. "You made it," she whispered. Richard tried to speak, but only managed 2 words. "The kids." Amanda smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks. "They're okay, you saved them, Richard, both of them." The days that followed were filled with cautious hope. Ethan and Emily recovered faster than expected, their young bodies responding well to the transplants. Richard, though weak, improved with every passing day. He wasn't just surviving, and he was healing. Doctors were stunned. His heart had suffered, but something, maybe determination, maybe love, had pulled him through. Then came the moment Amanda had both feared and hoped for. Mrs. Whittaker, Emily's adoptive mother, arrived at the hospital. A kind woman in her early 50s with tired eyes and a full heart. She walked straight to Richard, dropped to her knees beside his wheelchair and said, "Thank you for loving her like that. For risking everything when you had every reason to walk away." Richard, overwhelmed, simply nodded, emotion catching in his throat. From that day forward, everything changed. Mrs. Whittaker made the choice no one expected. She would relocate to New York, so Emily could be close to her biological family. "She deserves to know all of you," she said. "And I think we all deserve to heal. Together." Months passed. Richard regained strength. Amanda and the kids moved into a new home, one Richard had quietly purchased not far from Central Park. Mrs. Whittaker joined them often, becoming part of their growing family circle. On a crisp spring morning, Richard stood in the backyard, watching Ethan and Emily chase each other through the grass, their laughter rising like music in the breeze. Amanda stood beside him, her arm linked through his. "Never thought life would bring us here," she said softly. Richard smiled. "I went looking for someone to leave my fortune to, and found a family instead." And in that moment, he knew. This was the legacy that truly mattered. This story wasn't just about a billionaire or a medical miracle. It was about love, sacrifice, second chances, and the true meaning of family. And now we want to hear from you. What part of this story touched you the most? Was it Richard's journey from loneliness to love, the bravery of Ethan, Amanda's strength, or maybe the unexpected bond between two mothers? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And while you're at it, let us know where you're watching from. It means the world to us to see how far these stories travel. Your words matter, not just to us, but to others who read them. You never know who you might inspire, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because tomorrow we'll bring you another story, one that might just move you even more than this one. Thank you for being here. Thank you for feeling this story with us. We'll see you in the comments.